Okay, let's dive right into this. What if one of the most famous villains in modern fiction could actually help us understand a really serious issue happening right now in the US? Well, today we're unpacking an article that does just that. It makes a powerful, pretty surprising argument about a recent survey on Indian Americans. And it all starts with a hate that, well, dares not speak its name.
So let's start with this big question. What actually happens when you have piles of data, all of it pointing to a specific problem, but no one is willing to call it what it is? This right here is the absolute heart of what we're talking about today. What are the real-world consequences of that silence? And here is where it gets so interesting. The author drops this brilliant analogy to frame their whole argument. They compare the refusal to name a certain type of bigotry to the wizards in Harry Potter being too scared to even say the name Voldemort. And the point they're making is, just like in the wizarding world, refusing to name the threat doesn't make it disappear. In fact, it might just give it more power. This is the key to understanding everything that follows.
All right, so let's get into the specifics here. The article we're looking at is a deep dive into a recent survey from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And here's the author's main takeaway. The survey is fantastic at showing the discrimination and the fear that Indian Americans are facing, but it stops just short of actually naming the specific hate that's driving it all.
And there it is, the absolute core of the argument. The author's claim is that the survey data clearly, and I mean clearly, points to something called Hinduphobia, a prejudice specifically against Hindus. But here's the kicker. That word is completely absent from the report. The entire article is about why that omission isn't just an oversight, but a really big problem.
So, what's the evidence for such a strong claim? Well, the author doesn't just make an accusation. They go deep into the survey's own data, and what they pull out is pretty eye-opening. Let's look at some of the key numbers they use to build their case.
First up, this number is just staggering. The survey found that 1 in 4 Indian Americans has been called a slur just this year alone. That's a huge number. And while the survey doesn't detail every single slur, the author connects this to other research showing these slurs are often explicitly anti-Hindu.
And you know, it's not just about words being thrown around. It's a much deeper feeling of unease. A massive 71% of Indian Americans feel uncomfortable with how their religious background is perceived in the US. The author uses this to paint a picture of a community that feels like it has to constantly look over its shoulder.
And that feeling? It has real-world consequences. It actually changes behavior. The survey found that 1 out of every 5 people is now hesitant to wear visible religious or cultural symbols, things like a bindi or a tilak. The author calls this what it is, self-censorship, and it's born out of fear.
And if you drill down even further, the survey finds that nearly a quarter of Hindus in the Indian American community feel that they face significant discrimination in their day-to-day lives. This is where the author starts to make a really crucial connection between what's being said online and these very real, everyday fears.
So how does that happen? How does hate that starts online, with clicks and keyboards, turn into fear you can feel in the real world? The author argues there's a direct and pretty dangerous pipeline from social media rhetoric to what happens on our streets.
And this slide really breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you've got what researchers call anti-Indian digital racism, which the author notes is frequently and explicitly anti-Hindu, with attacks on deities, traditions, you name it. And on the other side, you have the impact in the real world, the fear we just talked about, the self-censorship, and even physical violence. The article's point is that these two things are directly, undeniably connected.
And the author is clear, this isn't just some abstract theory. They provide a chilling list of real-world incidents from just the past year to show this isn't just talk. We're talking about multiple temples being vandalized across the country, gunshots being fired at a place of worship while people were inside, a documented sharp rise in hate crimes, even organized opposition to stop new Hindu temples from even being built. So all of this, the data, the fear, the violence, it all leads to the author's final and most powerful point. And it brings us right back to where we started, back to Harry Potter and the simple power of a name.
So here's the conclusion, plain and simple. The author says all of this, the hate, the fear, the violence, it has a name. It's called Hinduphobia. And by refusing to use that name, the author argues, we make it basically impossible to actually fight the problem head-on. And this isn't just about one survey. The author points to other academic work, like a Rutgers University study, which found that Hinduphobia is systematically ignored by both the media and in academic circles. This suggests a pattern, a consistent tendency to just look the other way. And that brings us full circle, right back to Voldemort. The author's final warning is this: by not naming the problem, we aren't protecting anyone.
We're just giving the threat more room to grow in the shadows, unaddressed and unchecked. So the piece leaves us with this final and very powerful question. What is the real cost of this silence? What happens when we have all the evidence in the world, but we're still afraid to just say the name?